What's up, everybody? Welcome back. And today we're talking about some of the changes coming to update 9.0, which is the Unreal 5 update for Squad. Offworld has posted some information regarding the version that they're planning to release. So hit the subscribe button, leave a like, drop a comment down below with your thoughts on the recent playtests, and let's break down some of this information and what it means to you. And don't forget, if you want to copy a squad or you want to gift a copy of squad, maybe to play the playtest or update 9.0 when it releases, you can use my code SLAY3K30 at the link in the description below for 30% off. So if you've been keeping track, there's been several open playtests for Squad and the Unreal 5 update. That's excluding several closed playtests that happened prior. But just last week, Squad posted an update by Howitzer discussing some of the things going on with Unreal 5. In this update, it's kind of interesting because he references the fact that the last engine upgrade was about 2 years ago, and most of the team is currently focused on the Unreal 5 update, which I don't think is surprising to anyone. And if you watched one of my last update videos on Unreal 5, you'll know that we have a release window being this summer, so it is getting close. So now what should we expect moving forward? Well, first, he references the fact that there will be several more playtests of Unreal 5. There's also supposed to be a release of the mod SDK for modders to update their mods to Unreal 5. Server performance improvements, and some testing of Unreal Engine 5.5. Apparently, the version has been changed from Unreal 5.3, I think, to 5.5. Now, this is not something I would normally just notice, but it was in here, and it was also sent as an update to partners. In fact, Norby, who did our interview a couple of months ago, gave us a little bit of a post explaining the shift from 5.3.2 to 5.5.4. According to Norby, they've been pleased with the performance they've seen for Squad on Unreal 5 with modern hardware, but older systems aren't meeting their expectations, which many of you have expressed concern over. Now, something else that Norby references is the fact that Epic and Offworld have had conversations and discussed rendering performance bottlenecks on old hardware. Epic encouraged Offworld to switch to 5.5 to improve optimization on lower-end PCs or older hardware. Now, Norby has explained that they've been looking at 5.5 for some time. This is not necessarily a new development, but that'll be on the developmental branch, not necessarily the production branch that goes out to all of us in playtesting or a live version of the game itself. At least not without proper testing, as they have to wait for third-party plugins to be updated, along with whatever fixes or hotfixes may get posted for the engine as it matures. Now, in their testing, they've seen a jump in rendering performance, especially for older PCs. In fact, Norby said that they're seeing a 30% increase in frame rate for systems 5 years or older. Norby goes on to say that in many cases, the game thread is actually causing bottlenecks within UE4, while UE5's game thread operates a lot faster, so they're getting better performance than they would in UE4 in the same situation. Now, while there's not a lot of information posted by Offworld publicly about this, I thought it was important to share with you all because this has been a main area of concern in the comments and just generally around playtesting would be the performance, especially on lower end or more dated hardware. So I think this is an important step for Offworld to make to help alleviate some of the concerns. And if you've already played in a playtest and maybe given up on it, maybe this will give you some excitement moving forward that Offworld is continuing to work on this. Now, to give you context, my PC is about 4 years old. I have a 3090 with an i9 10K. This is typically settings at about medium and running in 1440. And what I tend to see is a more smooth performance of Squad in Unreal 5 with less hitching than I do in Unreal 4. With the exception of ADSing. That is the area that I've mentioned several times still is problematic. That is where I see the frame drop. I mean, sometimes 15 to 20 frames, which is huge, especially, as you would all agree, in a first-person shooter. Now, Offworld has done some fireside chats with devs to talk a little bit about some of the changes and things like that to expect with Unreal 5 and some things that they're working on. And I thought this piece having to do with picture-in-picture scopes was kind of interesting if you do need a little bit more of an explanation of how the system operates. So this is Patrick Fisher with Offworld, who's a lead programmer. Listen to what he has to say about the picture-in-picture scopes and what they're working on.
Other challenges that we've run into is PIP scopes and just GPU bottlenecks in general. UE4, we would essentially render the scene twice, then we would mask out the specific area for your PIP scope to show a more zoomed in portion. With UE5, in order to have that second render, we also need to do the nanite base pass again. We need to do another lighting pass, another shadows pass, and that's very taxing, even for high-end GPUs. We're exploring now ways that we can avoid having two passes at all, or reuse some information from the first render pass. But we have to be very careful with this because lighting matters, shadows matter, and we do need to render that in the PIP scope.
Now, if you played some of the recent playtests, you'll know that Offworld did input some sort of method for picture-in-picture scopes that basically blocked out everything around the scope itself. Now, I tried this a little bit in one of the recent playtests. And what I found is that, sure, I do get better performance, but it's kind of like an adjustment because you don't get the peripheral view where you tend to make callouts just by seeing something sort of out of the corner of your eye, or at least that's a simulated idea. Now, of course, you do get a very sort of hyper-focused scope because everything is blacked out around the scope, but it still feels a little bit odd for this game. I'm not sure what the overall opinion was on at least this test to see how this felt to people. I know this isn't necessarily a finished product by any means, but it was something interesting to introduce in a playtest format, at least, to players. Now, since we are talking about performance, I thought it'd be interesting to go ahead and listen to a couple other things that Patrick brought up with regards to performance and things that Offworld is focused on in trying to improve. If you did watch my interview with Norby, we covered a lot of the technical areas that Offworld was working on to not only address that transition to Unreal 5, but also performance. And Patrick goes into a little bit more detail on a couple of the areas that they've had to focus on quite a bit.
The biggest blocker that we ran into has definitely been changing physics systems. With UE5, we no longer have access to physics, and instead now we have to use Epic's Chaos. It's not as performant as we would like, but we've done a lot of stuff in order to work around those performance limitations. Chaos itself as a physics engine just isn't that performant. And so to get around this, we used what's called an entity component system. And each of these entity components is responsible for a very specific area of a vehicle. Each of the wheels is actually its own entity component, and we get a lot of just little tiny bits of performance out of each time we do this, and this just adds up when you have the number of vehicles that Squad does. As Epic continues to improve the physics engine, we're going to see better results going forward.
Now, I realize many of you, based on the comments, are much more familiar with Unreal 5 than I am, and some of the challenges that Offworld is facing in making this transition actually happen. Now, I want to reference a clip from my interview with Norby to talk about a couple of things. A, when he felt like the transition from Unreal 4 to Unreal 5 should happen, as well as understanding that this is, again, the start of maybe the next phase, more so than a bookend, as it relates to the development and continued development of the game moving forward into the future.
You know, this is an interesting point where internally there often comes up the question of whenever we do an engine upgrade is what is the right time to release it, right? How do we determine that? And the answer really is the right time to give a new engine version to players is when it's better than the old one, right? There's always trade-offs with everything, but overall the experience in that new version is better than the old one. And then part of playtesting is getting that feedback on whether that is the case right now or not. But what you're getting is not the end all of Squad in Unreal Engine 5. It's the beginning of the journey of Squad in Unreal Engine 5.
So I'm curious to know what you guys are thinking in terms of the Unreal 5 performance on your specific machine. Is it starting to outperform what you have in the Unreal 4 version of Squad? Because overall, with the Unreal 5 playtest, I've seen maybe not the crazy frame rate that some people might want when you talk like 100 plus, but I'm seeing a more stable frame rate, with the exception of ADSing, obviously. Now, the hitching in Unreal 4 becomes a glaring issue, attached to the fact that ADSing in Unreal 4 is still problematic. It's still going to drop your frames 10 to 15 frames. That exists in both versions of the game. So like Norby said, it's kind of like a trade-off of certain things, but I've started to see like a more stable or consistent performance out of Unreal 5, but I am interested to know how many of you have also seen this or seen something different. So I'll probably set up a poll in the community tab, or you can drop a comment down below referencing maybe the performance difference between Unreal 5 and Unreal 4 for you. Now, realistically, we know 9.0 is coming one way or another. My hope is we continue to get polished or some updates regarding what may be left over to continue to work on even after the 9.0 release, not just with regard to content, but more so with performance and stability improvements, especially when it comes around things like ADSing, how vehicles may be doing certain things with regards to performance across the board, or server stability. But I'll try to bring that information as I get it to help share with you all, so be sure to hit the subscribe button so you can be updated on new videos. Leave a like, and again, drop a comment down below with your thoughts, and I'll talk to you next time.